Yeah, FABA for advisors by advisors. Hosted by Evan J. Mayer, where the real ones talk business, no filters, no favors. How they structure, they practice, how they build their team. Independent route or employee machine. Talk platforms, payouts, culture, and growth. What really works when you out there on the road? No can lines, just advisors being straight. Real conversations from the people who relate. Double podcast for advisors by advisors.
This is For Advisors by Advisors. I'm your host, Evan J. Mayer, and today we have two very special guests, and Mr. Oscar Castellanos, I always get that one wrong, and Melvin Perez.
Hello.
Oscar, how do we say your last name properly?
In Spanish, it's Castellanos, and in English, it's Castellanos.
All right, so it sounds about the same to me either way you go. So anyway, welcome to the show. Oscar and Melvin are two phenomenal financial advisors that are part of the Fortuna Wealth family and are located in Dadeland, Florida. They have a very interesting story that I thought the advisor community would want to hear today. They've both been in the business for a long time, over 30 years of financial services experience, 25 years for Melvin. Oscar, I think you 30 years, is that right? Well, no, that would make
a little bit shy of 30. I'm getting close to 30. Yeah,
you're getting close to 30. So lot of experience. I thought this would be a great podcast because they recently joined on April 1st. But the interesting part was their path to getting here and kind of the different flows. So what I'd like to do first is talk a little bit about how you guys got started in the bank channel and how you guys connected and when your partnership began and what the thought was to leaving the bank channel and then eventually joining the wirehouse side of Raymond James.
All right. So I started in banking at 18 as a teller. I kind of got a job as a teller by mistake almost. It's a long story. I'm not going to bore you with the details, but when I was working in the bank, I realized that, I found the industry interesting, and we had an advisor in the bank, and one of my very good friends ended up being his assistant. So, I was hanging out with these guys in lunch, and I quickly realized that, that's kind of the road I wanted to take. So eventually I became an assistant. I did that for a couple years, and then I became a bank advisor. Once I was an advisor, I met Melvin. We were both advisors. At this time, our businesses had, nothing to do with
What year was this?
23 years ago.
23 years ago. Okay. So you guys have known each other for almost over 23 years. You were both separate bank advisors. When did you guys join as a team? When did that come up?
So we were separate bank advisors. This was back in the day at Washington Mutual. Our manager left the city, and I ended up leaving with him, but I was leaving behind a very good branch and a pretty good setup. So, Mel and I were friends, and I recommended that he takes over that branch, which he did. Then I did Citi for a couple years. And honestly, when I was at Citi, I was so tired of the bank BS that I really considered leaving the industry. At that time, my ex-wife and I, we had a title company, we had a mortgage company, and it was doing very well. And I was going to leave the business, so one day I talked to Melvin, and I'm like, you know what, Melvin, I'm sick of this. I'm thinking about leaving the industry. At that point, he had left from Washington Mutual to a small bank called Colonial Bank. He was the advisor in the international private banking division. And he tells me, Oscar, I understand why you're tired. These big banks are a freaking nightmare. I have a lot of opportunity here. Why don't you come join me? And let's give it a shot. If you don't like it, you could always leave the industry later. So I went over.
So you guys actually teamed up at Colonial.
Yeah, we teamed up at Colonial.
Teamed up.
Yeah.
Awesome. And how many years were you guys at Colonial for?
Mel, you were there a little longer than I was, right? Because you were there about a year or two before I got there.
Like 2 or 3 years before you got there.
Yeah, he was there 2 or 3 years before I got there. I was there for about 2.5 before Colonial goes under, right? Financial crisis hits, it hits the fan. Colonial, the last couple days, FDIC knocking on our door, getting kicked out of our office. It was scary. We had some sleepless nights there.
What year did you end up leaving Colonial, roughly?
09, I believe, right, Mel?
09. And where did you guys end up going?
So when Colonial was going under, we interviewed with every firm in town, and we met this guy named Michel, a French guy, older guy. He was the area manager for Morgan Keegan. And honestly, man, it just clicked. We met with him and we loved it. We both walked out of that meeting and we're like, this is the place for us. So we went to Morgan Keegan. We were there a couple years, and then Morgan Keegan was for sale. So again, we started interviewing with all these different firms, and Raymond James was one of the ones we liked. Coincidentally, Raymond James bought Morgan Keegan.
Got it. So you guys joined Morgan Keegan at the end of the financial crisis,
Right.
during the recovery period there, and then Raymond James comes over 2 years later, buys Morgan Keegan.
Right.
And you're in the RJA side at this point. You're on the employee side.
Yeah.
That's right. We stayed in RJA and we wrote out our contract, right? When we joined Morgan Keegan, we had a 7-year contract. So when RJ came around, we still had 3 or 4 years left. So we rode that out.
Now the change. I mean, that's a lot of change in a few years, from bank to Morgan Keegan, then back to Raymond James. And historically, advisors move a lot. And I think in your case, it was financial crisis time. I had to move a couple times too during that time, so it was a little different back then. The technology and tools when you initially got to Raymond James was pretty dramatic, I'm guessing, compared to what you had exposure to on the bank side and at Morgan Keegan. Is that fair?
We, at that time, Raymond James was not the Raymond James that it is today. And the Morgan Keegan acquisition, if I'm not mistaken, was, it almost doubled the size of the company, right? So Morgan Keegan actually was a great firm, and it had, it had pretty good technology and pretty good resources. Raymond James at that time, technology was a little bit behind, but I think that when Raymond James came in and purchased Morgan Keegan, they made a conscious decision to kind of bring the best of Morgan Keegan, the best of Raymond James, and build a very robust program and technology. So when we first got to Ray J, it wasn't necessarily better than Morgan Keegan, but shortly thereafter, they just, they really invested a lot of money into technology. And from there to today, I mean, it's amazing the things they've put together.
So let's talk. Yeah, let's talk a little bit about, you're with Raymond James. Your contract ends, which is always it's a wirehouse slogan more than anything. Like, my contract ends, where's my next contract going to be, right? And that was 2017-ish, 2018-ish?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
All of a sudden, you make the road to Provenance on the RJFS side. We've heard a lot of stories of, you'll hear from Raymond James and Associates advisors that have made the move, that it wasn't easy to make the move, and the concept that management got in the way a little bit of making that move. Sometimes you hear that there is no, that shouldn't happen, and it should be an easy, smooth process to wanting to do it. Was it easy and smooth for you guys?
It was pretty easy. I'm not gonna lie. When we moved to Provenance, our goal was really to be independent, and since RJFS was independent side, we felt that we got a pretty good deal. We had an office, so we had the independence, but we had a little bit of support. I'm a certified financial planner, and I know they were big in planning, so it kind of, that was one of the things that we liked about the move. Being at Raymond James and moving to the independent side, I think our clients understood they were still with Raymond James anyways. I mean, looked exactly.
So it was a pretty easy conversation, right?
We're just moving to a different division of Raymond James. They understood.
How did the RJA management take your ask to go and look on the independent side? Was it, oh yes, let's help you do this, or was it, that's what I want to hear. Was it, yeah, go ahead and do it, or was there roadblocks?
I think RJ as a company is 100% okay with it. I feel like RJA local management had more of a problem with it because obviously they were losing, 2 producers. So it was like within the office, it was very taboo. You couldn't talk about it. When you would talk to higher ups in RJ, they were more okay with it. And it was actually, a pretty normal thing. You'd be surprised how many advisors any given year shift from the employee side over to the independent side.
So when you did make the move to the independent side, was there a new contract that was put into place or no?
We didn't do any contract with them at that moment. We obviously got a better payout. We became independent contractors, 1099. We felt like When we were looking, we were weighing out, do we open our own RJFS office or do we go with for Provenance? And we felt like Provenance was kind of a happy, kind of the best of both worlds, right? We would have some
Sure.
independence and have some of the benefits of being independent, but at the same time, at that time, they offered very good support, and we felt very at home there.
Did any part of you want to look at going outside of Ray J under a new contract? As you guys had said, my contract's up. Like, did part of you go like, hey, there's money out there at a different firm we should look at?
No, I think we felt like Raymond James was where we wanted to stay. I mean, even from Morgan Keegan, one of the things that I liked about the Morgan Keegan and the merger with Raymond James, the culture, forget about everything else in technology, the culture was very similar. I mean, you can pick up the phone and talk to someone at the bond desk. You can pick up the phone and speak to anybody, and everybody's happy to talk to you. So, we wanted to stick with them. We looked at everybody anyways, and, what we contemplated was to kind of go independent, and even going into Provenance, I always stayed in my mind. I told Oscar all the time, man, we had that opportunity because our changes in the past didn't come because we wanted to change. They changed for us. The situation changed, the bank changed, they were sold,
Sure.
FDIC. So
Mergers,
it was never,
acquisition.
so I was always a little scared about being with, some other team, and they changed. And as and Oscar will probably tell you the story of Provenance, but just to answer that question.
Well, just a little background for the audience and for you guys, if you didn't already know it. I interviewed with Provenance actually when I went independent in 2019, so about a year after you guys. And I remember there was a couple things I did not like about it that made me decide to not go forward with them. But they did have a nice setup. They did have CPAs, and we have multiple offices, we have multiple support angles. We have referral sources. Those referral sources, from what I've heard in years past, I didn't miss out on much there. But per se, like, as far as it being an OSJ and a friendly OSJ, it always seemed that way. So you end up going with Provenance, and you end up staying there for, we'll call it 3-4 years, and pretty happy.
Well, we were there like 8 years.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I'm going to go into that in a second.
Okay.
But about 3 or 4 years you were there. And then all of a sudden, Provenance states that it wants to go RIA. Was it more of a, hey guys, we're doing this and here's the process? Was it more, let's all get together and talk about it and talk about the positives and negatives of doing it? How was it kind of presented to you guys?
I think that they basically made it seem like we would still be clearing through Ray J. We would have everything, all the resources we had before. We were just going to have a little bit greater flexibility, and then eventually maybe have multiple platforms, but just have more autonomy and not have to really color between the Ray J lines. You know what I'm saying? Really, when it was presented, it was, we were led to believe that it would be very similar to what we had before.
And when you made the move, did clients have to, was a repapering? What ended up having to transpire during that time to get the accounts moved over to the RIA side? Was there much work on your end, or was there client conversations you had to have?
There was one signature that was needed, but it was a pretty simple process.
So basically one signature. And what was your conversation at the time to clients on why this was transpiring, or did you not really have to say much to them because it was Ray J and you were still keeping the accounts technically at Ray J on the custody side?
I mean, we let them know, that we would become our own broker dealer, that this would give us a little bit greater flexibility and access to additional products that they may or may not benefit from. But yeah, the accounts were staying the same, account numbers are staying the same. They were staying at Raymond James, so it wasn't a tough conversation, to be honest with you.
So I remember at that time that they were making the move, I had met an advisor named David Berg, who's on our team, and he was partners with Adrian and David Marshall. And I remember I went out to lunch with David. There was no solicitation on my end. It was more David came up to me and said, "We're both in Boca. Let's grab lunch." And David loves to go out for food, right? Yep. So we go and we grab lunch, and he's like, "Hey, we're with this firm. They're leaving. We might want to stay." And I did hear from through the grapevine that at that time, Oscar, you guys were potentially going to stay, and you chose not to. What was that decision like? How close were you to pulling the trigger to staying? I know you regretted it at one time. I think now you don't because you ended up getting paid to come back. So that's always a good thing. But talk a little bit about that.
Well, I'll talk since Oscar wants me to speak a little bit more. I remember David, man, and we still talk about David. We're like, man, David was a smart guy, man. We should have listened to him that time. Listen, we had a pretty good relationship with management, man, and we believe in people, and we started to see some change. We weren't knowledgeable about what was coming, and honestly, it kind of worked out at the end, like you said, but that's when we started to see some changes that was causing issues at that moment. Why? Because they had their own documents. Sometimes we felt like we had to do the work double. We had the OSJ at Raymond James, we had the OSJ at Provenance. So, the work was getting harder to do. For example, I'll give you an example, just in annuities, just to talk about annuities. Interests were really high at that point, so we were doing some fixed annuities, but the paperwork and the process of doing an annuity was day and night. I mean, for something that we do here that takes us, a few minutes, man, it's a few days. And just in paper, everything was manually. So, so we started to see some changes, and we started to notice that, especially Oscar mentioning Melvin, man, I think they're leaving Raymond James. They had a nice, pretty big book, and Joshua was cheaper. So we kind of made sense of that.
So just fast forwarding so the audience knows. So more of the conversation at this point is they stayed. They were at Provenance for a few years, 2-3 years. And as they stayed, they're starting to see some of these promises per se not materializing. Things are not being easier. They're actually more difficult than creating your own BD and having that freedom and flexibility that you guys were kind of promised. And I know, and at this stage, just full disclosure, I had met with Oscar. I think we met at Shooters in Fort Lauderdale, and this was a year prior to even the consideration of a move. But you guys were already not happy about a year out from the move. Like you kind of just saw the writing on the wall prior to then, and then as that year progressed, I think that's what you're talking about, Melvin, where they added Schwab. They were starting to push more of a Schwab new brokerage relationship on you guys, and it was subtle, right, at first, and then it became less subtle as the comp plan changed.
When I think about it, we were growing and we were opening accounts. So we were in a situation where I was asking myself, Melvin, man, you want to move now? The momentum is here. Our fees are going up. We're getting more accounts opening. So I think that kind of stopped us from moving. I believe. But Oscar, I mean, what do you think?
Well, listen, I think we would both agree, and Evan, I think you would agree as well. We always had an amazing relationship with Raymond James, right? It's not just lip service. Like we really felt like we were a part of Raymond James. And at the time, Provenance was just getting a little bit further away from Raymond James.
Wow.
And that's not what we wanted. We always said we'll probably write out the rest of our careers at Raymond James. And there's been times that we've looked at other firms, even when we were thinking about leaving Provenance, we looked at other firms. And you know how car guys always say, oh, the answer is always a Porsche, right? Well, like the same thing happened here. Every time we'd look at other options, we look at other firms, the answer was always Raymond James, right? It kind of got to a point where it didn't necessarily make sense for us to stay with a firm that was little by little creating a little bit of distance from Raymond James when the answer for us was Raymond James. And maybe having multiple platforms is a great thing for them. I have no interest in using another platform. I honestly have everything I need right here. And, becoming your own broker dealer, it's a lot harder than it sounds. You just automatically think, oh, I'm going to get a little bit higher payout. Yeah, but what does it entail? It's very, very difficult. And I think in the case of Provenance, I think that I understand why they went down that road. However, I think that they were experiencing and probably will continue to experience some growing pains because it's a very difficult business. There's a reason why you don't see a lot of small broker dealers. It's a
Yeah, I mean,
very,
small
very
broker
cutthroat.
dealers are very, very cost ineffective and time consuming, and the support isn't there. So I think what was great and kudos to Provenance was when you guys did go to them to broach the conversation of, hey, we want to stay with Raymond James, and we're feeling like this is potentially a good exit time given all that's coming down the pike. And obviously, we've learned a lot over the last 3 months alone. But you guys kind of saw the writing on the wall, and they did give you the permission to go ahead and re-engage Raymond James in those conversations, which I think for you guys ended up becoming a home run, because I think at one time when you had left, the conversation was they're probably going to have to repaper all their accounts, to no, this will be a simple form, kind of similar to what we did when we left Raymond James and we came back to Raymond James. So talk a little bit about how easy of an experience that was from custody Raymond James back to the independent side.
Well, PWA, I mean, honestly, they were gentlemen about it. I think they were a little relieved when we left. As you know, I'm a talker. I'm vocal. When I see something wrong, I usually point it out, and it's not to be a jerk. It's just that I want to make things better, right? I want to
Sure.
make our company better. If tomorrow I think you're doing something that I disagree with, I'm going to tell you, hey, Evan, I think you're doing this wrong. I think we could do it better like this. So it's not that wanted to be a jerk about it, but I would often point things out. And, maybe they didn't want me to point things out, right? So I think that when we finally told them we were leaving, I think they got it. Maybe even a little bit of relief on their side because this vocal individual would no longer be here. So I think they were gentlemen about it. I think Ray J made the process incredibly smooth. I know we're a little bit of guinea pigs, and we did have a few hiccups along the way, but all in all, I would say it was a great process. And really, you know, yes, we've moved around a couple times, Evan, but the truth is that, like Melvin said, most of the times that we've moved is because the company changes, something changes within
Actually,
the company.
if you look in the last 14 years, most of the movements wasn't because of you; it was everybody else
Exactly.
100.
moving.
Well, that's what I'm saying. Most of the time,
Yeah,
it was a
And,
merger.
and
it was an
honestly,
acquisition.
I personally don't think those guys were happy to see you leave. Yeah, you bring up points, but your points are to make things better. And I think at the end of the day, if they saw that anything different, I think that's on them. I know we're extremely lucky to have you and as part of the team, and hopefully you're feeling the team concept of why you join an existing OSJ, not create your own and kind of be siloed, because there is some net benefits to not only higher payouts, but being able to communicate with other advisors, share ideas, conversations, have other people come up with thoughts that you're not thinking of. And I think at the end of the day, is in the financial advisor community, we're never done learning, right? It's always, what's the next step? What's the next iteration of who I am, and how do I get better at what I do? So you made your way back April 1st. As you said, couple bumps in the road. We learned some things that we can advise on other advisors that haven't made that move yet. What would be your pitch? If you think about it, you're really a Raymond James lifer for most of your career. I mean, since 2012, you've been here in some form or fashion. Now that you're back on the RJFS side, though, why would you ever leave RJFS again?
Oscar, I don't think we would. I mean, basically, we came back to something that we saw at one point. So I don't know what will make us. I don't know what the future holds. But we're happy here, man. We're happy with, being at banks, being at different places, being in an institution where they really say, look, we care about the advisor and your independence is key. And that's the fact. And that's why we're here. I mean, thank God every time we need anything, I mean, basically we call you or we call Raymond James, and it's never been an issue. Anytime we need help from any department, we call them. So, I don't know what the future holds, like I mentioned, but we're pretty happy where we're at. We love the independence. We love the office here. Our clients, it was easy. Listen, we've been Raymond James for over 20 years. In this department, we're basically going to, have full access to everything Raymond James has, but also give us the independence to guide you the way we think is best. So, and I think clients understood that. I do remember some of our good clients that, we speak a little bit more in depth about the changes, just because, they're maybe want to understand a little bit more. They always ask the question, what is provenance here? What do they do? In our relationship, because we always worked with Raymond James. We didn't use a lot of, the resources, the referrals that you mentioned before provenance. So, for us, it's going back home. That's how I felt about it.
And I also think it's important to point that out. Sometimes OSJs or RIAs anticipate that advisors are going to use what they're suggesting we allocate the money towards instead of paying you. And I think the when an advisor is looking to make a switch from wirehouse to independent or independent to wirehouse or whatever it is, that at the end of the day, you want to make sure the resources that you're going to actually utilize, you would actually pay for. And then you got to look at that cost of how much money am I actually netting now versus what I netted at that RIA, and did I actually get the net positive benefits? And I think, Melvin, you broke that down perfectly, that like you can have all these extra functions in an RIA, but if you're not going to use them, it doesn't matter anyway, does it?
Exactly.
That's right. And at the end of the day, you're sharing some of that cost, right? So, they can have all these employees, all this staff, but if we're not using that, why pay for it, right? Um, Listen, Raymond James, like you said, we've been affiliated for for over 20 years in one way or the other. I think that Raymond James, for being a big company, they've done an amazing job at keeping that service
Personal.
culture, where where the advisor is the client of the company, and then the clients are the advisor's clients, right? And when I call the 1-800 number, for back office, the same two or three ladies answer the phone that have been answering the phones for 20 years. That's amazing. Like you don't that doesn't happen nowadays.
And they're not in India, they're actually in Florida, or they're
And they're right up the street. You
not
call,
that there's anything wrong with India, but
No,
it's nice to be able to contact somebody that's actually here and
somebody knowledgeable, and somebody that's kind, and somebody
Yeah.
that, it's amazing how you call and it's the same people year after year after year. You have resources like Dean from AMS, people that know the company, that know the products, that are there to help you, that are going to come to your office and visit. I think that, listen, no place is perfect, but I think that they've done a really good job at putting together a good formula where you can run your business. And I think that and Fortuna has done a great job at filling that little gap where a lot of advisors don't want to have to worry about OSJ duties, right? So you have a great company, you have Fortuna filling the OSJ gap, and then Melvin and I, as advisors, we can run our book, we can run our investment business. And yeah, we do have to run a little bit of our company, but a lot of the stuff that we don't want to do, you're taking care of.
Yeah, you run what you want to run, and you don't have to run the other stuff. So
Exactly.
I think that's a win-win. Lastly, talk about the future. What is I'm putting you a little bit on the spot here, Melvin. We'll have you go first. Melvin and Oscar, what's the future look like 2, 3, 5 years from now? What are you guys looking to evolve in the practice? Is it grow more internally? Is it more recruitment based? Is it more office based? What are some thoughts you guys have around what the future looks like?
Check all of them. No, I mean, listen, I'm focusing at the moment. Remember, we were international. We do international business, and there was a point where, after COVID, everything kind of was shut down. So we're doing a lot of Zoom. Thank God for Zoom, to be honest with you. We were able to stay connected with our clients, international. Actually, that's probably one of the pluses that I remember from back in the days with Provenance. They had Zoom already set up, so it was okay. So my goal is trying to grow a little bit more that international side that we kind of left behind a little bit. Of course, one of the things that Oscar started actually, and and he's been focusing a lot is, going back to our existing clients, asking for referrals, do reviews, and he can tell you a lot more about that, since he's been staying very busy. And
And you, Oscar?
I want to grow on all fronts. I mean, honestly, I'm very interested in recruitment. I want to build our office. I want to build our team. At the same time, I'm growing my business by fast, by leaps and bounds. I really want to grow the business. I think that we have a lot of potential. I think that there's a lot of older advisors in our business that are maybe retiring or kind of working their way out the business. So I think that if we have a well-oiled machine, I think the future is going to present a lot of opportunities to acquire books or acquire businesses. And really, I'm in growth phase. I mean, I think that in the next 10 years, I think we can easily double our business. I think we have the capacity.
I think there's no doubt you guys can. The talent's there. So, and when the talent's there, it's just about the energy and drive to do it, right? Awesome. Hey, so if any advisors want to be able to reach you guys, again, they might be on the independent side, they might be on the employee side. You've been on every side, right? So you pretty much know what's going on. What's the best way they can get a hold of you?
Honestly, probably email. Anybody can email us. I'm happy to talk to anybody. I'm a talker. I've mentored a lot of people. A lot of our former assistants have gone on to great things. Some have become advisors. Some have become ops supervisors. I'm always willing to help anyone that needs help. So if anybody needs advice or just wants to, bounce ideas, I'd be happy to talk to anybody.
Awesome. Oscar, Melvin, great job, and appreciated you guys joining the show.
Oh, thank you,
Evan. Thank you.
Yeah, FABA for advisors by advisors. Hosted by Evan J. Mayer, where the real ones talk business, no filters, no favors. How they structure, they practice, how they build their team. Independent route or employee machine. Talk platforms, payouts, culture, and growth. What really works when you out there on the road? No canned lines, just advisors being straight. Real conversations from the people who relate. Double podcast for advisors by advisors.